You know, tomorrow's a special day. It's not a special day because it marks the beginning of summer or, because it's the typical vacationing season. It's a special day because it was set aside to remember a group of people that are very easily to be forgotten. A group of people who didn't come home, who died in service to our country. And this morning, before we get started in the sermon, I asked Mike Riley, if he will, would you stand up and lead a prayer of thanksgiving for us, for those?
Let's pray together. Heavenly Father, we're so thankful, Lord, that we can come here this morning to worship you, Lord, in spirit and truth. We're so thankful, Father, we live in a country where we have the freedom to be here this morning, to serve you, and remember Jesus. We're so thankful for the church that you built, Lord. We're so thankful for the Bible, Lord. We're so thankful for the service members who have fought and died for our country, Lord. Just remember them. Pray that we'll never forget their sacrifice for our freedom. So we're so thankful for your sacrifice, Lord, for our eternal souls and hope that we have of heaven one day. In Jesus' name, amen.
Thank you, Matt. I want to talk about the Memorial Day in my introduction this morning, but I didn't just want to use it, right? I wanted to try to do some small thing to honor those who paid the ultimate price. You know, we set aside days to remember for a reason, because we oftentimes need a reminder. And I don't know so much that we forget. I think a lot of times we tend to remember the wrong things, don't we? There's so many other things in life going on, and human beings have what's called a negativity bias. And what I mean by that is if you go to work and you work somewhere 20, 30 years, and every day somebody tells you, good job, good job, good job, you're probably not going to remember the thousands of times, right, that they tell you good job. But you let somebody fuss at you once about something you did wrong, and what happens to that memory? Well, that's cemented in your mind. You remember it just almost in vivid detail. You know where you were, and you know what the project was, and you know all the details about that. That's a nasty little habit that we as human beings have. And I think that negativity bias makes one aspect of our Christian life maybe one of the hardest parts. And that part that is hard for us because we remember the negative so easy, I believe, is forgiveness. You see, when someone does something to me, against me, I know it. And I remember it. And it sticks out in my mind. I may have brothers and sisters who love me thousands and hundreds of thousands of times, but those negative moments, they're hard to forget. You might say they're impossible to forget in some ways. But this morning I want us to look at a man in the Scriptures who, for all intents and purposes, basically had to forgive his whole family. And I hope that we can learn something about forgiveness, because, like I say, this is not just this morning we're going to read Scripture and we're going to do a theological practice of, I'm going to preach to you and you're going to hear the Word, and it's easy when it's just on paper. But when you're the one going through it, when you're the one that is faced with having to forgive someone else, it's not easy. There's emotions involved. There's heart involved. And I hope the things that we can learn today can help us when it's our turn, when we're the ones that have to think about forgiving someone else and make that decision. If you got your Bibles, go with me this morning. We're going to start in Genesis chapter 45. We're going to start in Genesis chapter 45. We're going to look at the story of Joseph. If ever there was someone who had to forgive somebody else, it would have been Joseph. Now, we don't have time this morning to read the entire story. We could back up into Genesis 37 and kind of see how Joseph was looked at and special among his brothers. He had the coat of many colors. You know, I don't know exactly what he thought was going to happen. I grew up with brothers, and you tried to go along, get along, and not start a fight. But Joseph comes in one day and says, "Hey guys, I had this dream where you're all basically serving me." I mean, how do you expect that to go over? And it doesn't just happen once, it happens twice, but you know the story. They're angry with him. They're going to kill him. And instead of killing him, they throw him in a pit. They sell him as a slave. They take that special coat of many colors and they sacrifice a goat and dip the coat in the blood. They tear it a little bit. And they take it back to their father and they lie to him. Your son that you love, this special son of yours, has been torn to pieces. And all the while, Joseph, all alone, by himself, in a foreign land, is living out his life. And it's a pretty amazing life when you study it. I mean, he is going to go from rock bottom more than once to the top of the mountain, if you will. When we come to Genesis 45, we find Joseph in basically, I don't know if you want to use the term vice president, or he's second in command in Egypt below Pharaoh. The situation and circumstances in Joseph's life had brought him to a place where he literally has every bit of Egypt and its material wealth under his thumb. And that's an interesting position to be in. When one day you're running the marketplace, and of all people, who walks in but your brothers, who you've not seen in years? And I want you to notice what happens. We're going to begin in Genesis 42. We're going to read verses 6 through 25. Now Joseph was governor over the land. He was the one who sold to all the people of the land. And Joseph's brothers came and bowed themselves before him with their faces to the ground. Joseph saw his brothers and recognized them, but he treated them like strangers and spoke roughly to them. "Where do you come from?" he said. They said, "From the land of Canaan to buy food." And Joseph recognized his brothers, but they did not recognize him. And Joseph remembered the dreams that he had dreamed of them. And he said to them, "You are spies. You have come to see the nakedness of the land." And they said to him, "No, my lord, your servants have come to buy food. We are all sons of one man. We are honest men. Your servants have never been spies." He said to them, "No, it is the nakedness of the land you have come to see." And they said, "We are your servants. We, your servants, are 12 brothers, the sons of one man in the land of Canaan. And behold, the youngest is this day with our father, and one is no more." So they think. But Joseph said to them, "It is as I've said to you, you are spies. By this you shall be tested. By the life of Pharaoh, you shall not go from this place unless your youngest brother comes here. Send one of you and let him bring your brother while you remain confined, that your words may be tested, whether there is truth in you. Or else by the life of Pharaoh, surely you are spies." And he put them all together in custody for 3 days. Why 3 days? Think God does anything on accident? On the 3rd day, Joseph said to them, "Do this and you will live. For I fear God. If you are honest men, let one of your brothers remain confined when you are where you are in custody, and let the rest go and carry grain for the famine of your households. And bring your youngest brother to me, so Your words will be verified, and you shall not die. And they did so. Then they said to one another, in truth, we are guilty concerning our brother, in that we saw the distress of his soul when he begged us, and we did not listen to him. This is why this distress has come upon us. And Reuben answered them, did I not tell you not to sin against the boy? But you did not listen. So now there comes a reckoning for his blood. They did not know that Joseph understood them, for there was an interpreter between them. Then he turned away from them, and he wept. He returned to them and spoke to them, and he took Simeon from them and bound them before their eyes. And Joseph gave orders to fill their bags with grain and to replace every man's money in his sack and to give them provisions for the journey. This was done for them. Can you imagine? Can you imagine what it had to be all those years later to see your brothers come rolling in this place and you've not seen them? Since apparently you were down in a pit begging them to get you out and to not do this and to save your life. Can you imagine what that was? And then in verse 21, they don't know it's him. They don't know that he can speak their language, and they're talking, guys, this is all our fault. We shouldn't have done this to our brother. Can you imagine what had to run through his heart? I can tell you what run through his heart. Hurt did. You see, the reason forgiveness is so hard is because it hurts. It's not a logical exercise. It's an emotional one. Everything that he'd been through, ripped from his family, thrown down in a pit, Potiphar's wife trying to lie about him. I mean, everything he had been through was because of their selfishness. And now here he stands, and he has power over them. I mean, of all the things Joseph could have done, you realize he had the power to kill them. He had the power to lock them up forever and let them rot. If this man had wanted vengeance, now would have been the opportunity. But he didn't do that, did he? Now, yes, he talked sternly to them. Yes, he's kind of jerking their leg a little bit. But in reality, what is he doing here? He's trying to get closer to the rest of the family. Think about that. I want you to bring your youngest brother to me, which, by the way, is his other full brother. For everything that he's doing in this moment, he's doing it because I want to see my brother again. Why is that? Why is he doing that? You see, forgiveness hurts, but here's what forgiveness really is. Have you ever noticed that in the middle of forgiveness there's this word give? What does forgiveness give? You ever thought about that? I hadn't until I started researching this lesson. What does forgiveness give? I'll tell you what it gives. It gives a second chance. It gives reconciliation. That word reconciliation literally means to be what? To be friends again. If Mikey sins against me and I forgive Mikey, what I have done is I have given us a chance for our relationship to be restored, for that relationship to be fixed. And if we'll do forgiveness the way forgiveness is supposed to be done, if we'll communicate and have boundaries and work together, not only can that relationship be restored, but that relationship may very well be better on the other end of that forgiveness than it was before the forgiveness happened. It may very well be the conflict and the thing that causes us to get nose to nose and get heart to heart and to figure it out and work it out. You see, forgiveness is a gift. And it's the gift of a relationship. That's really what it is. When, we can talk about the details, and they did this and they did that, but in reality, what's at stake is relationships. Your relationship to that other person, and maybe even if you don't forgive, your relationship to God. Relationships are what is at stake. But now, understanding what it's about and the fact that it hurts, we're going to fast forward in the scene a little bit, right? They go home and they tell their father, and he doesn't want to let Benjamin come back, and eventually they run out of food and they have to come back. And I want you to notice what happens when they return. We're going to fast forward to Genesis 45. Look at verses 1 through 11. Then Joseph could not control himself before all those who stood by him. He cried, "Make everyone go out from me." So no one stayed with him when Joseph made himself known to his brothers. And he wept out loud so that the Egyptians heard it, and the household of Pharaoh heard it. And Joseph said to his brothers, "I am Joseph. Is my father still alive?" But his brothers could not answer him, for they were dismayed at his presence. So Joseph said to his brothers, "Come near to me, please." And they came near, and he said, "I am your brother Joseph, whom you sold into Egypt. And now do not be distressed or angry with yourselves because you sold me here, for God sent me before you to preserve life. For the famine that has been in the land these 2 years, and yet there are 5 years in which there will be neither plowing nor harvest. And God sent me before you to preserve for you a remnant on the earth, and to keep alive for you many survivors. So it was not you who sent me here, but God. He has made me a father to Pharaoh, and a lord to all his house, and a ruler over all the land of Egypt. Hurry and go up to my father and say to him, 'Thus says your son Joseph, God has made me Lord of all Egypt. Come down to me and do not tarry. You shall dwell in the land of Goshen, and you shall be near me, you and your children and your children's children, and your flocks and your herds, and all that I have. There I will provide for you, for there are yet 5 years of famine to come, so that you and your household and all that you have do not come to poverty.'" Why did he do that? You read this whole account, and I tell you, go back and read it, right? I didn't want to keep us here 3 or 4 hours this morning reading the whole story and talking about every detail of it. But why, when they first come, why did he send them back and not only give them the grain that they needed to eat, but put their money back in their sacks? Why did he do all the things that he done to them? I'm going to tell you why. Because he'd already forgiven them. Forgiveness has to happen inside of us first. Now, you don't read the words here, Joseph forgave them. But I'm going to tell you see it in his actions. What if Joseph had not forgiven them? What if for 20 years, 30 years, I don't know how long it was. What if for 30 years, every day he got up and he thought about it and he stewed over it and he ground his teeth over it. And he let angerness and bitterness and hatred build up in his heart. What do you think he would have done when he saw his brothers for the next time? He'd have killed them on the spot. That's what he'd have done. But that's not what he did. He sent them back with food. And yes, he laid out a specific set of instructions for to bring my brother back. And before we get to verse 44, or when we get to chapter 44, like he's trying to keep Benjamin back away from them, he plants his cup and accuses them of theft. Okay, I get it. There's a lot of emotion involved here. But why does he break down finally and tell them who he is and say, listen, don't be angry with yourself because this was all part of God's plan? Because he forgave them first. Forgiveness has to happen internally first. You see, I don't think Joseph realized one day that his brothers were going to walk in after he became the Lord of Egypt and that he was going to save his people. You know, here he tells them, listen, don't be mad. Joseph can finally see the plan. You ever had that moment in your life when you can look back and something happens and you can see God's plan? And it's just astounding, right? I don't think that happened until his brothers walked in. But I'm going to tell you something. You can't see God's plan if you're bound up with hatred and anger, if you're out for revenge. I mean, Romans 12 talks about, vengeance is mine, I will repay, says the Lord. Now, did his brothers do him wrong? Yes, they did him wrong. Did it hurt? Yes, it hurt. But Joseph was ready to forgive them, and because he was ready to forgive them, when they walked back in, he could look around at this pile of food behind him and his family who's starving in front of him and say, this happened for a reason. How did he put that together if he had not already forgave them? Now, I understand. There's another element, another side of forgiveness, and we're going to see in just a moment in Genesis 50, his brothers are going to ask for forgiveness. Forgiveness can be given. But before forgiveness can be given, you've got to prepare it. You understand what I'm saying? I've used illustration before about Food Giant and fried chicken. They cook fried chicken every day. Whether you go ask for it or not, they're going to have fried chicken. But if you go to them and you say, you know what, I was wrong, forgive me, they're what? They're already prepared. $5.95, take it to the register, right? You have to forgive internally, irregardless of whether the other person ever comes ask for it or not. If nobody goes buy fried chicken, they're just going to have to throw it out, but they have it ready. And forgiveness is something that you have to prepare in your heart first. If you don't, it'll eat you alive. If you don't, it will be like a backpack that you keep putting more weight and more weight in. I've thought before about a truck with a trailer. Sometimes you see people going down the road and you think, you really shouldn't be pulling that trailer with that truck. There's too much weight in there. You know, you can put enough weight on the truck, it won't pull it no more. And that's what will happen to our heart if we don't forgive. I mean, I can show you verse after verse this morning. They go and they ask Jesus, teach us how to pray. And of all the things that he says in that prayer, the one he explains in verse 14 and 15 is, if you're not willing to forgive, God can't forgive you. God was willing to forgive you, so you've got to what? You've got to forgive. And I got it, it's not easy. I got it that it hurts. I got it that they did you wrong. I got it. But just because it's not easy doesn't mean it's not right. Forgiveness starts with us. Whether or not the other person ever comes asks us or not for forgiveness, I've got to be ready. If I wait for somebody to ask me to forgive them, then I'm basically giving them even more control over me. If Chandler done something wrong to me, I see Chandler every day, and I'm looking at Chandler like, Chandler, ain't you going to ask me yet? I need you to ask me. Come on, Chandler, you're supposed to ask me. I'm hung up over here. That's not how it works. God doesn't want you to be bound. Forgiveness has to start inside of us first. But then look here, Genesis 50. This is after Jacob dies. And I think his brothers were kind of being selfish here, but irregardless. Verse 15 of Genesis 50. When Joseph's brothers saw that their father was dead, they said, it may be that Joseph will hate us and pay us back for all the evil that we did to him. So they sent a message to Joseph saying, your father gave us this command before he died. Say to Joseph, please forgive the transgressions of your brothers and their sins because of the evil they did to you. And now please forgive the transgression of your servants of the God of your father. Joseph wept when they spoke to him. His brothers also came and fell down before him and said, behold, we are your servants. But Joseph said to them, do not fear, for am I in the place of God? As for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good, to bring it about that many people should be kept alive as they are today. So do not fear. I will provide for you and your little ones. Thus he comforted them and spoke kindly to them. Why? Why would he do that? I think he tells you in his words why. So they ask, right? I mean, I've heard people say before, right? If somebody doesn't ask you to forgive them, you don't have to forgive them. And there is an aspect of forgiveness that's transactional. When I say that, I mean one person asked another person for forgiveness. But as we already shared, if I got to wait on somebody else, that's control over me. It's not the way it works. You notice here in verse 19, he says, am I in the place of God? Why does he bring that up? Because Joseph realized there's some things that are above my pay grade. And vengeance and retribution are some of those things. Now, you understand that Joseph here didn't ignore what they did. You look at verse 20. Why did Joseph say, as for you, you meant it for evil against me? Why did he say those words? Why didn't Joseph just say, oh, guys, it didn't matter, it's okay. Oh, guys, it was nothing. It wasn't nothing. It was something. You realize how many years Joseph has walked around with this idea in his head that my brothers done evil against me. But even though he knew that, he didn't let that weigh him down. I don't think Joseph figured out the entirety of God's plan until his brothers walked back in that day. But like I say, when they walked in, he could see it. You meant evil against me, but God meant it for good. And I'm not going to punish you. And I'm not going to treat you bad. A lot of times we say, well, you should just forgive and forget. First of all, I don't know, how do you forget something? Unless it's where you laid your car keys, right? I've never been able to intentionally forget something. I unintentionally forget things all the time, but I've never been able to intentionally do it. And here's the other thing. Forgiveness wouldn't mean as much if you could forget about it. If Matt did something wrong against me and I just said, okay, Matt, it's okay, hang on a minute. It's gone. We're good. It'd be easy to forgive Matt if I could remember. But forgiveness means more when I do remember, and yet in spite of what I remember, I still love him and I still treat him like it didn't happen. You can't forgive and forget. You're not going to just automatically erase the pain of it. We see here multiple times Joseph cries. Why does he cry? Because it hurts. But in spite of the hurt, in spite of all the things, what's he going to do? I'm still going to do what's right. Why? Because I follow God. I'm not in God's place. Even if I want to punish you for what you did wrong, I can't do as good a job of it as God can do. And maybe they don't need to be punished. Maybe this is the lesson they needed. Right? We do ourselves a great disservice when we say, I'm going to take something that's God's business and make it my business. Maybe your forgiveness is the very thing that turns a soul around and brings it to its eternity with God. Maybe God knew that you're the one strong enough to take it. Maybe you're the one spiritual enough, like Job, to take this weight upon your back and lose 10 kids and lose everything you own and lose all this stuff to show that Satan was wrong. That These human beings will not just curse me, and they don't just serve me because I give them a bunch of stuff. They actually love me. I don't know. I don't know all those details. But I have to trust and I have to have faith in the one who does know them all. That's why forgiveness has to be internal first and it has to be external second. It doesn't ignore the hurt. It doesn't even ignore boundaries. You know, boundaries are a good thing. Jesus says they smack you on the cheek, turn the other cheek, but he didn't say you had to keep on getting smacked. You see, the point of forgiveness is to restore a relationship. You think about everything that we've talked about this morning, and we wrap up our thoughts. You start the Bible in Genesis 3, and we won't go read the verses, but what happens? Adam and Eve, they think God's holding out on them. They sin against him, and they're cast out of the garden. They're cast out of this perfect paradise that God made for them. And then you go to Revelation 21, right? John says, I need to see a new heaven and a new earth, and God will be their God, and he'll wipe away every tear from their eyes, and all these things, right? You go from a relationship broken to a relationship restored. What happens between Genesis 3:22 and Revelation 21? A lot of forgiveness. God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son. Why did he give his Son? He gave him so he could forgive. Think about that. I've never thought about that till recently, but right in the middle of the word forgiveness is the word give. I don't like it when God does that. But if I'm going to practice forgiveness the way God has practiced it to me, I've got to give. And it may take every ounce of strength that you got. But see, that's the other good thing, is you're not alone. You're not alone because God is with you. You're not alone because you're surrounded by a group of people here that love you. And there may be somebody sitting in this room right here today that you need to forgive. Don't let this infection hinder your soul. Don't let it keep you away from your God for an eternity. I know it's hard. I know it's probably unimaginable. But I also know that it was hard for God to watch his Son. I know it was hard when he saw him sitting there hanging on that cross. My God, why hast thou forsaken me? Why art thou so far from my groaning? That was hard for him too. God knows about hard. Bring it to him. If we can help you today, come while we have this invitation song.